Hey y'all, who dat and what is up? I am Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold. It's going to be a solo edition. Steve had some family issues he had to attend to, and we don't really have time to wait around this week to record another episode because we will be out at Saints Minicamp, mandatory Minicamp, on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Tuesday and Wednesday will be open to fans, which is nice because that means it'll be outside. And I only say it's nice that it'll be outside because that means I'll be able to record some videos. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you wonder why we haven't posted any, I call them highlight videos because I can't think of another word, B-roll effectively from practice, it's because when they send us inside, they say we can't record on our phones. And we, a radio station, kind of live on our phones. We don't have professional video cameras, and they say you're out of luck. So theoretically, assuming the weather cooperates, we'll get finally some footage from practice we can share, play on the podcast, post on our YouTube channel, and go from there. The practices themselves are going to be very, very similar to what we've been describing, which is no 11 on 11s, no contact, no pads, a lot of kind of finesse work, 7-on-7 drills. So you'll get to see the quarterback. You'll get to see Tyler Shuck for the first time. And that's exciting. I'm excited for fans to get out there and get a look at the rookie because I think he's looked pretty good. I think Spencer Rattler has looked pretty good. And so what are we going to talk about today? Well, I'm not going to give you my OTA notes per se from last week's session because we posted an episode over the weekend where Steve and I got into a majority of that. And I don't think that it makes sense to rehash a lot of it. I do want to get into a few different notes in this first segment. We'll call it a rundown segment. This is going to be a 3-segment. Even though I promise we're going to change up the format, this just makes sense as a 3-segment pod. So we're going to do it. This first segment is going to be the rundown segment. What news has there been? Not a lot. A couple visits to make note of. Will the Saints bring in another wide receiver, another cornerback? Let's talk about it. Also, media day. Hey, we get some fun pictures. Also, Alontae Taylor. Kellen Moore had some interesting comments. Bobby Hebert has a take I want to get into. And that kind of leads me into the rest of the episode, which segments 2 and 3 will be what are the key position battles that we're going to be watching primarily in camp, not so much at OTAs, but once training camp gets here and you can really, and the rubber can kind of meet the road on a lot of this stuff, what are we going to be watching for? So the second segment is going to be offensive position battles, obviously one to rule them all, but there will be others. So let's break those down. Segment 3 will be defense and special teams, and it's going to be a gigantic question mark next to the defensive line, but we'll get into it. But first, media day. Media day? Media day. What does that mean for the Saints? Well, it means everyone gets into the building, puts on their jerseys, and takes fun pictures. Ideally, no one's going to pose like Jake Haener did for the rookie showcase with his duck lips and whatnot. You know, those pictures live forever. JPEGs don't just go away. But primarily, it's you're looking cool. You're basically getting everything ready for the hype video to play before the games. One thing I will make note of, Tyrann Mathieu looks different. That's the only way I can describe it. Tyrann Mathieu shaved off his dreads this offseason. Looks like a completely different guy. If you're watching it on YouTube, you can see the picture up to my left. Otherwise, you'll probably get a look at him if you're out there this week, and you'll probably get some photos this week where you're just like, who is that guy? Because even back in his LSU days, you had kind of the honey badger look with the top. Now it's just shaved completely down. Looks like a completely different person. I don't know. Maybe he's faster. Maybe he's more aerodynamic. I don't know. But that's the type of information you get coming out of media day. So I won't spend a lot more time on it. What I will spend time on is a few free agent notes. One guy, Nick Chubb, running back, former Browns running back, kind of doing the rounds here. The Saints kicked the tires on him. Does not sound like he's going to end up here. Sounds like he's going to end up on the Texans, barring anything else. And that's not a surprise to me. A couple other visits. We know about Asante Samuel. He's still out there. I think of all the free agent defenders the Saints could possibly bring in, he makes the most sense. Jair Alexander was cut by the Packers today. I know he's going to be a name people talk about. I don't see it. when you're in the situation that Jair's in, you don't go to a rebuild. You're 28 years old. You want to go get a ring. The Steelers would make sense. It really depends on whether he has a good relationship with Aaron Rodgers or not, but that's the type of destination I could see him going to. I do not expect Jair Alexander to come to the Saints unless the Saints offer the most money, and I don't expect the Saints to offer the most money, and they shouldn't offer the most money because they're not in a position to offer the most money. So I think we can just put that to bed. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to get him in for a workout, because that's just what you do as a team. You kick the tires on everybody. I mean, what else are you doing? But I don't see that happening. Asante Samuel Jr. with the connection to Brandon Staley and the ability to show up and kind of translate some of the defense, I think that would make sense, just like Cedric Wilson makes sense for the Saints on offense. He was a guy I thought they were going to move on from, and then they hired Kellen Moore, and it was like, oh, he speaks Kellen Moore, keep him around. So Asante Samuel Jr. is just a guy that makes sense, especially if he can prove he's healthy. We're going to continue. Another guy, Gabe Davis, former wide receiver for the Bills and the Jags, coming on a visit. Makes sense, right? If I had to pick one big need the Saints have on offense in terms of, okay, they kind of have to go sign somebody to fill this need if they choose to, it would be a big-bodied wide receiver. It would be a 6'2", 225-pound wide receiver who can make a catch in a phone booth, who can go over the middle of the field and hold up, and Gabe is that guy. So I think that's who we're talking about. He was very productive with the Bills. 4 seasons, he had 161 catches, 2,730 yards, and he lived in the end zone, 27 touchdowns over 4 years. I mean, you'd sign up for that alone. Last year with Jacksonville did not go particularly well. He was limited to 10 games. He had a meniscus injury. He had to have season-ending surgery. I mean, that's why you have a guy in for a visit. That's why you have him in for a workout. He was limited to about 20 catches, 200-something yards. He fits what the Saints need. You have him in for a workout. We'll see how it goes. The other thing to keep in mind with him is that the Jaguars still have money owed to him that is subject to offsets, which means whatever the Saints pay him, the Jaguars will get that back. He's getting paid by the Jaguars either way. So whatever team signs him is almost certainly going to sign him for a minimum contract. And so he really gets to pick his destination, because there's not going to be a bidding war, because no one's going to bid higher than the amount the Jaguars have to pay him anyway. So realistically, he gets to pick his destination. He's 26 years old. Maybe New Orleans is where he wants to be. Maybe it's somewhere else. But I think that's going to be more about whether Gabe Davis wants the Saints and whether the Saints want Gabe Davis. And let's be frank, they don't have a spot to guarantee him, because between Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Brandon Cooks, I mean, you're not going to say, hey, you're going to show up and supplant one of these guys. Maybe he outplays them, but he's going to have to commit to outplaying them. So that's going to be a question. One more guy to talk about, Jonathan Bullard, former Vikings defensive tackle. He would make a ton of sense. My only issue is you already have like 17 defensive linemen, and you're going to have to figure that out one way or the other. But if your concern, which it should be, is, okay, how do we improve the run defense? That's where Jonathan Bullard thrives. So he's another guy to keep in mind. For now, there's no signings. I would be surprised if you see a signing prior to the end of minicamp. Like, I think that's where you're going to target a player, is in the month break between minicamp and training camp. You bring a guy in, he's going to show up on the first day of camp, and you're going to get going. Wouldn't really make sense to do that prior to minicamp and say, hey, you got to show up. It's mandatory. No. If you haven't signed by now, you are not signing up right before minicamp. So you have to show up. No, you would rather sign next week and then have 3 weeks to figure that out. Anyway, so that's where I will cut that off. That's the end of kind of the news portion of the rundown. Let's take a quick break, and we will come back. I want to talk about Alontae Taylor, what Kellen Moore had to say about Alontae Taylor, what Bobby Abreu had to say about Alontae Taylor. This is Inside Black and Gold. Make sure to subscribe. We'll be right back. Coming back in on Inside Black and Gold, Jeff Nowak. We went through all of the kind of quote-unquote news in the rundown, so let's get to some more of the notes in the rundown. The first being, Alontae Taylor sure seems to have some fans. And one of those fans is a pretty important fan, and that's Kellen Moore. So let's hear what Kellen had to say about Alontae when he was asked after the final OTA session.
What have you learned about Alontae Taylor in OTAs?
Yeah, I love watching Alontae. He is he's everything you want. He competes every day. He's got juice. He's got energy. He's out there flying around. He can play a number of positions. Just feel like he's going to become a really prominent leader for our team.
So why do I play you that clip? Well, in my experience, when you have a head coach talking that glowingly about a player, particularly one who's entering a contract year, that next contract probably isn't that far away. The Saints are usually good for at least one contract extension each preseason. If you go back to 2021, that was Marshawn Lattimore. You got a contract extension done. If you go back a couple of years ago, talking about Cesar Ruiz, got a contract extension done. If you're going back to last year, you didn't really get a contract extension with Rashid Shaheed, but you bought out his final restricted free agency season, so kind of got that done. But the extension was for Pete Werner, who you locked up prior to him hitting free agency. Who's entering that contract year this year? Well, you have Rashid Shaheed and you have Alontae Taylor. So should the Saints be trying to get a deal done with Alontae? Probably. And I think Bobby Hebert had a good take on it on Sports Talk last week. So let's listen to what the Cajun Cannon had to say before we move on.
But the only thing about with Alontae Taylor, Mike, and you mentioned this, okay, if I'm your guy, if I'm the new Marshawn Lattimore in the Saints uniform, I'll do whatever the team wants, but you got to pay me like an outside corner. You can't pay me like no slot corner. You know how you want a hometown discount and all that? So if Alontae Taylor kicks ass and he does whatever the team wants, whether it's outside or inside, and he's amongst the best, because you got to start somewhere, and he's going to be playing with a lot of confidence because he's the man right now. Kool-Aid, we just want him to be a legit starter, Kool-Aid McKinstry. But Alontae Taylor, no, we don't have Marshawn Lattimore with the Commanders. Paul Sodadivos with the Giants. So Alontae Taylor, you the guy, you the leader in that room.
Just like that.
So what are you going to do? So you want to get paid like an outside corner? Well, help us whenever, whether you're on the inside or outside, or you blitzing, when we sending you and being that all-around cornerback. No, that's how you could see the value he is to the team just by performing that way.
So, yeah, I think Bobby is spot on there in that if I'm Alontae Taylor and you're like, hey, let's get a contract extension done, which I think would benefit the Saints because I think Alontae is going to have a good year. He's going to come in and say, but I don't want to get paid as a slot corner. I'll play in the slot for y'all. I'll be your star, right? I'll be your Jalen Ramsey. But you got to pay me like Jalen Ramsey. Otherwise, I'm going somewhere else where they'll pay me what I deserve. Because here's the thing. Alontae Taylor, I know a lot of people are going to look at the stats from last year, the coverage stats, but a few things are important to remember when it comes to coverage stats. One, they are very subjective. Like, we're not talking about a drop versus a catch. We're not talking about a sack and a pressure versus a hurry. We're talking about who was the closest defender to the player who caught the ball, and then those numbers go against you. So the second you throw somebody in the slot, coverage stats become irrelevant because there's so many dump-offs that you are not actually in coverage for that then get credited to you as a catch, right? You look at the number of catches allowed and you say, wow, that's so high. But then you look at, okay, but who was second on the team? It was Ugo Amadi because he was in the slot for a majority of the season. So slot corners are always going to get kind of hosed on coverage stats. Beyond that, I think what a lot of people are overreacting to is in the second half of last season, Alontae Taylor, after a year of being told, you are our dedicated slot corner, we are going to have you play the slot exclusively in camp. We got Paulson Adebo on one side. We got Marshawn Lattimore on the other side. There are starters. You just have to own the slot. Halfway through the season, not only are you asking him to play on the outside, you're asking him to be your CB1 on the outside, match up with the other team's best receiver every game, and say, good luck, kid. Well, as you should have expected, it didn't go particularly well. When you set up players to fail and they fail, It's not on the player, it's on the coaches. You hear that all the time. Coaches say, we want to put our players in a position to succeed. Well, they have, for the last 2 years, they have put Alontae Taylor in a position to struggle. And wouldn't you know it, he struggled. 2 years ago, he spent all of training camp working on the outside in a competition with Paulson Adebo. Bradley Roby played in the slot. At the last second, they cut Bradley Roby and throw Alontae in the slot. And it's like, wow, it doesn't look like he's ready to play in the slot. He's also not like committed to playing in the slot because he wants to be an outside corner. This past season, you did the opposite. You put him at nickel all training camp, and then halfway through the season, he's your top outside corner. Like, what I want the Saints to do is pick a lane for Alontae, and at least, you know, what you can say for it is he has experience doing all of those things. He has experience being put in bad situations. So when you put him in a good situation, he should be able to succeed. Regardless, the Saints should want to keep Alontae Taylor around because he's a talented player. And if you watch the tape, if you really watch the tape, there are issues, there are struggles. But, you know, when you look at the coverage numbers, you know, when you allow a 90-yard touchdown pass, which was the case against Jerry Jeudy and the Browns, it was just a coverage breakdown. That's going to look bad. The numbers are going to balloon very quickly. Whereas even in that game alone, he had some really nice reps. He had some really nice one-on-one coverage reps. He's a good cover corner. You can use him in a lot of different ways. And that's the reason you hear Kellen Moore, you hear his coaches raving about him. So you should want to extend him. The question is going to be, how much are you willing to commit to a guy that you have demonstrated you are going to play inside, and you're kind of committing to playing inside because the star role is important to Brandon Staley's scheme. So let's say, okay, we're going to make you a top 20 cornerback in the NFL, a top 20 paid cornerback in the NFL, not a top 10, which is probably what I would be asking for. But the demonstrated ability isn't there to be a top 10 corner, because that would mean you're getting paid in the range of a Tyson Campbell, who is making about $19 million a year, a little over $19 million a year. I'm not paying Alontae Taylor $19 million a year. Although if he is your top corner, that's not unreasonable money, right? You were paying Marshawn Lattimore. The difference is he was Marshawn Lattimore. So what would it take to be a top 20 cornerback? That would be Kyler Gordon of the Bears, who is also a nickel corner. You know, he plays both. He can play outside, he can play inside. But you could argue that that is the highest paid nickel corner in the NFL right now. Kyler Gordon makes $13.3 million a year. Does that sound palatable? I think it does, right? If you can look at Alontae Taylor and say, hey, we're going to pay you 4 years, $52 million, would you balk at it? I feel like that's a good number for a guy that's still in his, that's just entering his prime, has proven he can play inside, outside, and as Kellen Moore explained, is a leader in that room. I think that's what you want to do. I think that's who you want to be paying for the long term. It's right in the range of a guy like Jalen Petrie with the Texans, another kind of corner nickel combo guy, $13 million. Jamel Dean with the Bucks, $13 million. So I think that's the question. Are you willing to pay Alontae Taylor $13 million a year? Because if you are, I think you can get that done prior to this season and lock up a key member of your secondary for the foreseeable future. And that's what I would be doing. Now, there's a few other contracts, right? Trevor Penning, you're not doing that. Rashid Shaheed, I think you'd probably want to do that. But go around and look at the wide receiver market right now and understand that if I'm Rashid Shaheed, I'm saying I'm betting on me. Because you got Rashad Bateman making $13 million a year on a 3-year extension. Now, obviously, it's a 5-year contract. It's off of his rookie deal, so it sounds lower than it is. But the new money on that deal is $13 million a year. Rashad Bateman. If I'm Rashid Shaheed and you're not willing to pay me $13 million a year, I'm saying I'm betting on me. That's what I'm doing. I got my knee cleaned up. I'm going to go out there and prove that I've still got the juice. I'm going to hit some big plays. I'm going to continue to develop as an all-around wide receiver. I'm not letting you off the hook for cheap. And the Saints are going to be in a weird situation because they're going to be on the hook for $16 million for Chris Olave next year. And then after that, they're going to have to pay through the nose to keep him around. So how much are you going to pay? What I'll say, and I'll wrap this up here, is if I am the Saints, I'm looking at my ledger and saying, yeah, next year we're going to have a hard time because we have to account for a big dead cap hit from Derek Carr. Beyond that, I'm looking at the rookie quarterback pay scale cheat code. Derek Carr comes off the books. You're starting to clear Taysom Hill, Cam Jordan, Tyrann Mathieu, Demario Davis. You're starting fresh. I don't mind paying a guy like Rashid Shaheed for the long term. I don't mind paying a guy like Chris Olave for the long term. I don't mind paying a guy like Alontae Taylor for the long term because I've got 2 years free of the Derek Carr contract because, say, Tyler Shuck is my quarterback. After this season, I've got 3 more years on a rookie contract. 2027, Derek Carr is off the books. I'm still on a rookie scale contract. And even by those standards, it's a cheap one because it's a second-round pick. So I can afford, if I'm dedicated to this not paying a veteran QB thing, then I've got 2 years where I can build a wagon of a roster. And I could start doing that now. So that's where I'll leave it. I know some people don't like Alontae Taylor. I acknowledge it. I don't think it's correct, but I acknowledge it's there. And we'll go from that. I think he's going to get paid this offseason. And the only question is, how much? But all right, this is Inside Black and Gold. I am Jeff Nowak coming at you solo for this episode. We will do a proper episode at some point in the near future. Obviously, scheduling has been an issue for us, but we'll be getting back into a more regular publishing cadence after this week, and we'll start doing it. Until then, stick around. We're going to be going through position battles, starting with offense in this next segment, closing out with defense. Who dat? We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak coming at you solo. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can follow the show at Saints_pod. And you can follow Steve wherever he is right now at Steve Geller WWL. You can also hear Steve daily on Sports Talk, WWL AM 870, FM 105.3, and the free Audacy app, where you can also get this podcast if that's not where you're listening to it already. But the rest of this episode is going to be position battles, and this segment specifically on offense. So we might as well start it off with the most obvious position battle and the one we are going to spend the most time talking about, and that is quarterback. That is Tyler Shuck versus Spencer Rattler versus Jake Haener. Is he really going to be a part of this whole thing? I don't know. It depends whether you believe Kellen Moore, and I think Jake believes Kellen Moore because Jake knows Kellen Moore really, really well. Jake, and I've said this on this podcast before, Jake played at Fresno State. His offensive coordinator at Fresno State, Kirby Moore. They run a similar offense, Kirby and Kellen. Jake's known Kellen since 2017. At least that's what he says. So I don't think that Kellen is just, telling Jake what he wants to hear. That said, I find it hard to believe you're going to have a 3-way quarterback competition. It's just not enough reps to go around. It's, they were having 3 quarterbacks throwing simultaneously at the practice the other day. It's not something you see every day, but that's only because one of those is a lefty and you can have him throw to the opposite side of the field in Hunter Deckers. So I don't know. Either way, right now it's Tyler Shuck, Spencer Rattler, and that should be the same at minicamp. Jake Haener isn't expected to throw until training camp. He's dealing with an oblique injury. There's really no purpose in pushing it at this point in the offseason, as frustrating as that probably is for Jake. And that means we'll get a heavier dose of Tyler and Spencer, who seem pretty closely matched right now. I think I'd put Spencer slightly ahead just because I think he operates more confidently. I think he's getting the ball out on time and a little faster. He's getting through his reads a little quicker. And he's attacking the middle of the field more. And that's the big thing that I'm questioning right now for Tyler is he willing to attack the middle of the field? It seems like he's opting for safer throws, being a little risk averse, which is fine. You're in your first month as an NFL quarterback. I don't want you taking crazy risks, but it does feel like that's going to hold him back in this competition if he's constantly checking down, and whether that's the right decision or not, that's where we are. That's what we are seeing right now. So with all that in mind, let's hear from Foster Moreau, who I asked about working with a young quarterback room for the first time in his career, all while, and I should make clear, not actually working on the field because Foster is dealing with an injury, but he is still very, very involved. He has been at every practice, every session, making sure he's heard. This is what he said about the quarterbacks.
What are some of the differences when you're working with a young quarterback? Obviously, you haven't played with him yet, but
yeah, I don't know. It's been different for sure, and we definitely have a competition on our hands. I think our guys have looked really good, top to bottom. I know Hayner's not able to get out there right now, but I think Jake's looked great. I think he's looked polished. The polish is certainly something I've noticed from year one to year two. Shuck is as advertised. I think he makes great decisions. Can spin the ball really well and throws a really tight, neat spiral. I mean, even Decker looks great out there. The lefty. I mean, I don't know. I haven't played with a left-handed quarterback in a long time. But we have a full-blown competition on our hands, and I'm excited to see what happens when bullets fly, when people are rushing the passer, just to see who steps up and what happens. It's been a cool experience though, right? Because those guys are constantly trying to better themselves, which is an awesome thing.
Yes, something I just noticed watching that clip in real time with y'all is that Foster's locker is apparently at the corner of F around and find out. It is not censored in the way that I censored it, which I did not. I was standing right there, staring right at it, and I did not notice that until just now. But that's accurate. I think that's accurate. But no, so yeah, I think that's kind of where we are. All the quarterbacks look good right now. And that's not to say that much, right? It's not, you should look good in 7-on-7s. If you don't look good in 7-on-7s, that's a problem. When I started to become really concerned about Ian Book as a potential professional quarterback, that's when it was like, wow, he does not look good in 7-on-7s even. Even when there's no pass rush, he is late. Every ball was 1 to 2 seconds later than it needed to be. And it just seemed to be getting worse, not better. So, it's not the highest hurdle to clear, but you do need people to clear it before you can move on to anything more complex. So I tend to agree with Foster there. I just that's really the takeaway right now is all these guys are spinning the ball really well. They're confident out there. That said, I do want to mention one of the reasons, and I say this a lot, camp stats are way overvalued, right? At least the way we talk about them, right? The team isn't going in there and saying, well, this guy went 15 for 18. That guy went 13 for 18. Thus, that guy had a better day. No, that is not how they look at it. They're evaluating every single element of every single play. They're looking at what the read was supposed to be. Did you go through it correctly? Just because you completed a check down does not mean that was an A rep, right? We don't tend to look past that. We tend to say, well, this guy went 7 for 8 with a touchdown, and that guy went 6 for 8 with an interception. That does not mean that one guy had a better day. Now, yes, obviously the stats are nice, but this is what Kellen Moore had to say when he was asked, okay, how do you kind of grade mistakes at the quarterback position as we're going through this process? And I thought his answer is telling.
Weight mistakes within what we look at it.
Yeah, mistakes are mistakes, but we also acknowledge, mistakes are part of this process. We're not to Sundays in the fall, and so, you make mistakes, you get to learn from them, and, hopefully we're not seeing a repeat pattern. That's the goal for everyone, and so.
What's kind of the most common mistake you're seeing right now from the quarterbacks, or something that they've grown from?
I think it's just working through progressions and sometimes not getting stuck on things, which is natural for all guys.
Yeah, and I think that's important. One of the reasons that I'm kind of pumping the brakes a little bit on Tyler Shuck is he looks a little too risk averse. And here's the thing. I don't want you making mistakes for the first time in a game, right? I want you making those mistakes in practice so we can point those mistakes out and fix them, right? That's why, and Derek, I know we don't like Derek Carr, but Derek Carr said this and I agree with him. It's I don't really get worked up about, I threw an interception in practice because I'm trying to test things. I am trying to suss things out of like, okay, can I throw this ball here to that person? How does he view this versus how do I view this? Where is he going to be? What is his depth going to be on this play? Do I need to throw it differently to this player versus that player? Like, those are the things you need to establish in practice. And getting it wrong is not a massive issue. Getting it wrong over and over and over again is a massive issue. Getting it wrong over and over again means you are not correcting your mistakes, but making a mistake one time, missing a throw is fine as long as the process was right. And that's where I think when we overvalue, well, he went 8 for 8. He had a great day. He had a perfect day. No, not really. Because if you made the wrong read and he completed it, it's still the wrong read, right? If you throw it over the middle of the field in a practice where they can't tackle you in a situation where the receiver would have gotten lit up in a game, just because it was completed doesn't mean it was a good play. You just killed that guy. Now it's imaginary, but that's how that happens, right? When you normalize that in a practice and say like, yeah, he completed it, and don't point out, well, yeah, but you got him murdered, right? So anyway, like that's why I'm a little more critical of, when Spencer leaves the ball high over the middle of the field. I'm going to point that out. I'm not just going to say, well, he completed a 15-yard pass to Chris Olave. It's like, yeah, but he got his head taken off anyway. So that's just something like when I rage on camp stats and I kind of scoff at like, well, this guy, the completion percentage, that's why. A lot of times I don't even report the camp stats. I report the circumstances because that's how I feel about it. Anyway, that's going to be the biggest position battle. I spent the most time talking about it because that's what we're going to spend the most time talking about. So let's move on from there. What other position battles are there on offense? Well, I would say the second biggest is going to be RB2/3. I think there's 2 spots to be won here behind Alvin Kamara. I think you're going to keep 3 running backs, and it's really just a question of who wins that job. At this point, your guess is as good as mine. I think Kendre Miller is probably the most likely candidate to be that RB2. I think he is in the best shape he has been. I haven't got a chance to catch up with him yet. Hopefully, I'm able to talk to him this week. And I was this close. I was this close, and then he got kind of dragged away by a trainer to get some. I don't even know what they were doing, but it was beyond my ability to follow him. And so, yeah, I'll catch up with him sooner rather than later. But I think he looks good. I think he looks in shape, and I think he's as positioned to succeed this season as he has ever been. Take that for what it is, right? His rookie season, he was coming in off a major knee injury. I don't think his fitness was right. I don't think he ever fully got right. And then he just had injury, and it just it was just a problem. Year 2, he had a procedure in the offseason on his ankle. I don't think he ever really got right. And then injury. This year, he is coming into OTAs, coming into camp healthy, knock on wood. So he's able to be in shape. He's able to kind of reset and attack the offseason in a way you want a guy to be able to do when he's trying to prove it at the NFL level. So Kellen Moore has said repeatedly, blank slate, blank slate. I think that's what you have, is you have a guy who's coming in and he's going to be allowed to prove that he owns that job, that he deserves that job. That doesn't mean you hand him that job. That doesn't mean he walks in as the guy and someone else has to prove that he's not the guy. It means that he's going to get as even of a shot as any of these other guys, which means it's wide open, right? And we've seen that throughout kind of the rotation of these practices. We've seen Devin Neal. We've seen Marcus Yarns. We've seen Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We've seen Velus Jones. We've seen Xavier Valade, a guy who most people probably wouldn't even know is on the team if you didn't have a roster in your hand. So, like, that position is wide open, and I don't even know how to handicap it right now. My guess would be Kendre Miller and Devin Neal. But Clyde has looked good. I think Clyde's a guy who has some juice. He's only 26 years old, right? Marcus Yarns looks really intriguing. Devin Neal is a bowling ball. And I say that in the most positive way possible. All these guys seem to be able to catch. All these guys seem to be complete running backs, not just guys who go out there and you can't send them out on a route. Now, they're not all Alvin Kamara, but I need to find depth that I can to make life easier on Alvin Kamara, because that's what I have failed to do since Latavius Murray left. And I would say that was on the low end of what you need to give Alvin Kamara as a compliment. he at least got the job done. I'd love to see a return to, a Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara combination, but with Alvin Kamara as the old guy and whoever else takes that role as the young guy, right? So that in 2 years or whatever, when Alvin Kamara's contract is up, I feel like, well, we have a guy. Because right now I don't know. So that's going to be the biggest battle to me outside of quarterback is who just steps up and says, I am the guy. If Alvin goes down with an injury, I'm the featured back. Because right now I have no idea who that is. So that's going to be a big battle, but it's just not one that we're going to get a good image, a good picture of during minicamp because you can't hit, right? You can't really get through a hole when there's nobody trying to tackle you or even trying to touch you. So that's not one we're going to see a lot of this week. It's going to be more about the quarterbacks. Either way, that's a big one that I have my eye on. Another one, who's that big-bodied wide receiver? Who's going to kind of take over that role? Do you bring in Gabe Davis? If you don't, then you're kind of looking at Cedric Wilson, Bub Means, Donovan Peoples-Jones is kind of the primary pieces that you're looking to fill there. And there's other guys on the roster, but that's a role on this team that is wide open. Whether you want to call it wide receiver 4 or 5, or how many wide receivers you're even going to keep, that is a role that needs to be filled. I would guess Cedric Wilson right now, and you're going to have Bub Means as part of this equation, just because I think there's a connection between Kellen Moore and Cedric Wilson that's going to be tough to beat, just in the sense that he knows the offense and he can operate at a high level in it. But Bub has looked good. Donovan Peoples-Jones has looked good. So I don't think that's a foregone conclusion by any stretch. 2 more. One is the only position battle I see right now on the offensive line, and that is Trevor Penning versus Dylan Radins. And right now, it's more Trevor Penning versus himself. And also right now, there's no way to even rule anybody out in that because you're not hitting. And until they hit, we won't know for Trevor. But that's going to be the only position on the offensive line that I have a question about is left guard. I don't expect there to be a ton of rotation. I don't expect there to be a ton of adjustments. I think that's going to be the group. And it's only going to be a question of, can Trevor Penning hack it at left guard, or do we need to have a veteran in there? To his credit, he is embracing this change. We played that audio for you in the last episode, so I won't do it again here. But, it's to the point that not only does he think this is something he can do, it's something he was encouraging. Like, he feels like his skill set fits the guard spot, possibly even better than the tackle spot. He'd still play tackle if they left him there, but he's honest with himself and understands what he does well, which I think that's a very mature thing to do. There can be ego when a position switch comes into play, and he's not doing that. So I'll give him a lot of credit there. One more, and it's okay, who's the blocking tight end, right? Pick one. Is it Jack Stoll? Is it Foster Moreau? I think Foster's going to have a role on this team. I don't know if it's going to be as the primary blocker, and he's not really going to be able to show it until he gets back on the field. We don't really have a timeline on that. He's coming off a knee injury. So we'll see. I will say when Kellen Moore comes out and says he's one of the, he's one of the all-time best locker room people I've ever been around, that's pretty high praise and a pretty telling indicator that he's going to be around. It's just going to be a question of how. The other guys, Maliki Matavau, Dallin Holker, Michael Jacobson, we'll have to see. I still like Maliki Matavau as, just from a size perspective. I think he can hold up as a blocker, and we'll have to go from there. But that's going to be a position to watch because you don't have a fullback on the roster. So whoever's going to be that kind of blocking tight end H-back role is going to be on the field a lot. Yeah, you might go 2 running back a lot too. But at points, you just want to have a big body out there who can be your lead blocker. And without a fullback, that's got to be a tight end. So there's a role to be won there. Right now, I'd lean toward Jack Stoll filling it, but we'll have to wait and see. All right, that is the position battles on offense. We're going to hit a break here, come back, and break down the position battles on defense and special teams. And it's going to be a little amorphous because the defensive line is all over the place. But let's get to it. I'm Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold, breaking down all the top position battles heading in to the 3-day minicamp session this week. Who dat? Subscribe, rate, review. Stick around. And we're back. One more segment on this solo edition of Inside Black and Gold. I am Jeff Nowak. Steve Geller will be back. You will see Steve Geller's face eventually, just not today. And the last episode was an audio-only episode. I promise he still exists. He is not just a brain in a jar. We will have him back, just not today. We'll figure it out. We'll get something to you. But for now, we are going through the top position battles. We went through the offense. Now it's time to go through defense and special teams. We'll start with special teams because that's the most obvious. And we've already talked a good bit about these guys, so we don't need to do a ton more. The punters, James Burnip, Matt Hayball, have not seen either kick yet, which is an interesting choice. Now, all three practices we've seen have been inside, so it's possible they've been doing their kicking outside, and then when they go inside, they're just like, whatever. But it's definitely going to be some kicks to be had this week, and so we'll be getting our first look at that. I don't really have a ton of takes to give you other than I'm excited to see James Burnip. He's one of just 2 UDFAs I had making my final 53, and it kind of goes against my traditional incumbent heavy approach. I just think, the skill set you see and the numbers that coming out of college, and the fact that I was not that thoroughly impressed with Matt Hayball last year kind of leaves that door wide open. So that's one to watch. It's a little tougher to grade because we don't always know what the kickers are what the punters are trying to do, compared to the other special teams position battle in Blake Grupe and Charlie Smith, where we know exactly what they're trying to do, which is kick it through the uprights. There's no debate over, was he trying to, go left to right, or was he trying to, bounce it? Like in this case, if it goes over the bar, that's a win. Under the bar, that's not a win. To the right or the left of the bar, that's not a win. So either way, right now, both guys look very, very good. Charlie Smith was out there. He's got a rocket, dude. Like that ball flies off his foot in a way that I have never seen before. I've watched a lot of guys kick. I have never seen a guy kick that high and with that much velocity. Other than maybe a Brandon Aubrey, like that's the only guy I can compare him to is a Brandon Aubrey, just in this fact that he can kick it so dang far. The problem is, are you going to actually utilize that length? And in most cases, the answer is no. I don't care if you can make a 70-yard kick. You're not attempting a 70-yard kick because the value, other than maybe a game-winning scenario or an end-of-half scenario, of getting 3 points versus the downside of missing and effectively giving up 3 points is just not something that most people are going to accept. And in most situations, you're not going to accept that. So unless your plan is to go out there and attempt a lot of 60, 70 yarders, I just don't see it being the case. He's going to have to win inside 50. The 70 yarders, the 60 plus yarders are fantastic. But if he doesn't win inside 50, they are not going to outweigh those kicks, the money kicks. Because we've seen Blake Grupe crush 50 to 59. Right? And those are the kicks you're actually taking in the competitive portion of a game. I've seen Blake Grupe hit from 63. Like he's got that kind of a leg. He doesn't have the comfortable from 68 kind of leg. But you don't take those kicks. So, we've seen both these guys kick 5 times. They made all 5. Blake's longest was 53, right down the middle. And that's been the difference to me from last year to this year. Of like, what does Blake do differently than Charlie? Charlie is more of a high draw, right? Blake's kicks are arrow straight. And in a dome, kicking mostly in a dome, I prefer the arrow straight kicks because you don't have to worry about where to start the ball. You're just kicking it straight, right? And as long as you're online, you're making it. If you're kicking outside a lot, if you're playing in at the Meadowlands, right? Where you have these kind of swirling winds, the draw is a little more of a power kick, and it can kind of cut through those winds and be a little more consistent than your kind of arrow straight kick, right? So that's why, when you grow up in Northern Ireland, you got these crazy winds. Like that's how you develop that type of a kick. And so I don't know. I just think Blake Grupe's style makes more sense for the Superdome, where you're going to play a majority of your games. But we'll have to see, right? And at the end of the day, though, it's going to come down to whether Charlie can win inside 50. And if he can do that and also has the monster leg, then I think you have something to talk about. But for now, I'd probably give Blake the battle. Beyond that, okay. It's really difficult for me to say there's a defensive line battle here or there or there or here, wherever. Because at this point, it's all over the place. I don't know who's going to play where. I don't know what this guy's role is going to be versus this guy's role. There are two established roles as I see it. Out of the 5-man defensive line, and I include the outside linebackers in that group, right? Devon Godshaw is your established nose tackle when you have a nose tackle on the field. No question. No one else is supplanting him. Maybe a Christian Boyd. I don't know. Maybe a Colin Saunders. I don't know. We'll see. But at this point, he is your nose tackle. Brian Brzee is your established defensive end, whether you want to call him right or left. He is going to be that 3-4 defensive end. And I think he's going to thrive in that role. I think he is better suited for that role than the defensive tackle, the 3 technique role you had him in. I'm excited to see what he can do in a 3-4 scheme where you are a little more freed up to attack the quarterback out of that spot than you may have been in your kind of run stuffing defensive tackle role. So we'll have to see how they use him, but I have no question that he is that guy. Outside of that, I think you're learning. And that's basically what Kellen Moore said when I asked him this week, how that's established. This is what he said.
This defensive scheme could do for a guy like Chase Young.
Well, certainly he's going to be a pass rusher, and there'll be some versatile roles that he'll be able to do, and we'll be able to line up in some different fronts and structures and all that fun stuff. But allow him to maximize, be an edge rusher, play with some width, and get after the QB.
Is there a bit of a discovery process on the defensive line at this point, just figuring out what guys can do in this new system?
Yes, absolutely. O-line, D-line, a lot of this is going to get figured out in training camp. That's just the reality of OTAs. And so they're doing everything they can. They're competing. Love the heck out of those guys. And once that comes, we'll get a better feel for them.
So, yeah, I think that's where you are right now is as the Saints defensive coaching staff, you are trying to figure out what guys can do. Okay, who's a weak side linebacker? Who's a strong side linebacker? Who makes more sense at a 3-4 defensive end spot? And so, like right now, I would have Chase as that strong side defensive end, but who's to say? Maybe he is your weak side outside linebacker, I should say. I kind of look at it as, okay, Granderson versus Chase Young, right? Like, who's better? Who is your kind of top option at either outside linebacker spot? And who does it better? Then you have Cam Jordan. Okay, where do you land in there? Are you a defensive end option? Are you kind of an interior rush option, or can you drop into coverage? Can you be that strong side defensive end? Beyond that, I think there's kind of a secondary battle, and I'm not doing a lot of depth battles here because, there's backup battles, but I think Isaiah Foskey and Fadil Diggs is an interesting kind of composition, or an interesting kind of juxtaposition of players. Because if I'm looking at it, I'm saying Isaiah Foskey deserves to be kept around. If that's the case, he needs to be more productive. He needs to look more productive than Fadil Diggs, than the number 253 pick in the draft, right? Like, you're going to stand those guys next to each other. They're going to have similar builds. They're going to do similar things. If I don't look at Isaiah Foskey and say, that's the guy I want to keep, if I don't look at him and say he's head and shoulders above Fadil Diggs, a 7th round pick out of Syracuse, right? Versus a 2nd round pick out of Notre Dame, then I might just move on from Isaiah Foskey. Like, I get it. He's a special teams contributor, and that's really going to help his case at the end of the day when, Phil Galliano bangs the table and says, like, now I need this guy on special teams. But as far as reps in the defense go, I don't know. Another one to keep an eye on is, that second defensive end spot, right? The spot opposite Brian Brzee. Nathan Shepard, Colin Saunders. And then a third guy who I think we should really be talking about more than we are is Jonah Williams. He's wearing number 54. He's a guy that was brought in specifically, to do this job. Chris Rumpf is another guy who was brought in with familiarity with Brandon Staley, but I think Jonah Williams is probably the more likely candidate in terms of probably going to make the roster, probably going to get on the field. John Ridgway is in that mix too. I didn't come away that impressed with him last year. There's a few other names, but right now those are the guys that I think are, you're keeping an eye on. And again, I don't know where to slot them. I don't say, oh, this guy's competing for this job, this guy's competing for this job. Because until you start hitting each other, until you start lining up in 11 on 11s where you can really get an idea of where everyone is, it's tough. But right now, everything, like Kellen said, like everything is up for grabs outside of maybe 1-2 spots. And that's really going to be determined in camp when you can actually do a lot of this stuff. One more position battle, and then I will let you go. CB2. And it's a little confusing because Alontae Taylor is really your CB1, but he's in that star role. And I mean, call it what you want. He's going to be in the nickel a lot. He's going to be inside a lot. And that means that in situations where you're going to have 3 corners on the field, Alontae's going to be inside. Kool-Aid is going to be on one side. I don't think he's competing. I mean, he's competing in the sense that everyone's competing, but I think that's his job. And then the question is going to be on the other side. Do you go with the veteran and Ike Adam in an alignment that we're actually very familiar with? Because in 2023, when Ike was here, when Alontae would kick inside, this is after Marshawn Lattimore got hurt, when Alontae would kick inside, Ike Adam would come on the field and he would play well. Like Ike played very, very well. Ike played well enough that he went and signed a deal with the 49ers that the Saints actually got a comp pick for, and now he's back. So, I while it's a completely different coaching staff on the defense, I still feel like they're going to be okay with that. And the only question is going to be whether Quincy Riley, 3rd-round pick out of Louisville, who just got back into individual drills for the first time on Thursday, how much can he move the needle and kind of force the coaching staff to say, no, we want to start this guy. We want to get this guy on the field over the veteran with probably a higher floor but a lower ceiling. Quincy's an older guy coming out of college. A lot of these college players coming out are older than you might be used to, right? Played a ton of snaps in college, intercepted a ton of balls. He's kind of known as being a ball hawk. We've seen Ike Adam drop an interception already. So I think that's probably the key is if Quincy can go out there and prove that, his ball hawking ways are not just a product of college systems. He can go out there and get his hands on some passes in this system and be that kind of turnover producing player that the Saints really need. Like Paulson Adebo was that player. He's gone now. Like it feels like every time the Saints got a big takeaway while he was here, like he was a part of it. I'll never forget that Bears game. He basically single-handedly took over on the defensive side of the ball. I think he had 2 interceptions, a forced fumble. And they needed every bit of it. So that's my question is, can Quincy Riley make that a conversation? It will eventually. Right? Like Quincy Riley is the guy you anticipate to be a player for you. That's why you took him in the 4th round. I think I might have said 3rd round earlier. But one way or another, that's going to be the conversation. So on defense, basically pick a name out of a hat on the defensive line. They're all competing. Specialists, obviously, this is a competition. And then CB2/3, Ike Adam and Quincy Riley. And maybe Rico Payton. A guy like Rico Payton can work his way into the mix. But right now, I'm looking at those 2 guys. And that's going to be it. That's going to wrap up this episode of Inside Black and Gold. Again, I am Jeff Nowak. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We've got 3 days of minicamp coming up. Ideally, at least one of those practices will be outside, so I'll be able to come back with some footage to show you guys, to prove to you I was there. The fans are going to be out there on Tuesday and Wednesday, weather permitting, and I'm excited about it. It's going to be a lot more fun over this week than it will be over the next month with nothing to talk about. But we will find a way as we do. So as always, thanks everyone for listening. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, rate, review on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Hit me up at Jeff_Nowak. You can follow the show at Saints_pod. You can follow my co-host Steve Geller at Steve Geller WWL. And until the next time, who dat? Go Saints. BZL. Peace.